You know that person who switched to organic everything, cooks at home, eats mostly whole foods, and still can't figure out why they can't lose fat? That might be you. And the problem isn't your food quality. It's how quality and quantity work together, or more often, don't. Today I'm talking with a chef who's cooked personalized meals for UFC fighters, NFL athletes, and Olympic level competitors. And he's going to explain what he sees go wrong when everyday people try to eat clean without the structure that actually makes it work. Plus, stick around because we're giving away an entire week of free meals, but the catch is you have to listen for the secret word later in this episode. Welcome to Wits and Weights, where in every episode we put a popular piece of fitness advice under the microscope, find the hidden reason it doesn't work, and give you the deceptively simple fix that does. I'm your host, Philip Pape, and today we're examining the claim about eating clean and losing fat. It sounds obvious, eating whole foods, eating lean proteins, lots of vegetables. Nobody argues with that, but a large number of my clients come to me already eating well and they're stuck. They're frustrated because they did the thing everyone said to do. It didn't deliver the body composition or fat loss changes that they expected. So what's missing? My guest today is Chef Mario Limaduran, culinary director at Trifecta Nutrition. Mario has a degree in culinary nutrition from Johnson & Wales University. He spent his career at the intersection of real cooking, but also sports performance. He was a chef at a 2 Michelin star restaurant in LA. He cooked for NCAA Division I wrestlers at Cornell. He ran a kitchen for NFL, NHL Olympic athletes. Such a resume. He also built and ran the culinary nutrition program for the UFC Performance Institute, cooking personalized meals for fighters during fight weeks around the world. So he's one of the few people around working in commercial meal delivery who has this depth of both culinary training and applied sports nutrition experience. So by the end of this episode, you are going to understand why eating clean without structure might be keeping you from making progress, how a performance chef thinks about building meals that are nutrient dense, protein optimized, and of course delicious, and what practical strategies you at home can use, whether you cook yourself or you use a meal service, to make the nutrition match your health and physique goals. Chef Mario, welcome to the show, my man.
Philip, pleasure being here. Thank you so much.
All right. So, we've never had a chef on the show. I was talking about that before we recorded. And I'm just curious about your process, really, to start off. Like when you prep food for someone who is performance minded specifically, so whether they're an athlete or lifter or somebody listening here, what do you think of first? Like, do you start with macros and micros and then make it fit? Do you look at food quality? Is it taste and preference? Like, I'm really curious about your process and the order of operations.
Yeah, that's a great question. So when you're cooking for anybody, you got to start with the sourcing of the ingredients, right? You go to the supermarket, you go to Costco. When I was with the UFC, I would use a lot of Amazon delivery from Whole Foods, and getting the highest possible quality produce, proteins, starch is essential to create a healthy, nutrient-dense meal, right? So the sourcing of the food is definitely important. Conventional food, mainly protein speaking, tends to yield a less nutrient-dense protein. Conventional and organic produce, there's no difference in the nutrition density. There's some concerns around the pesticide use, but generally speaking, you can get the same nutrient density from a conventional food or a fruit and vegetable as an organic one for half cost too. The same goes for starches. Sometimes it doesn't really make sense to buy organic, but you still want to source fresh produce. You still want to source not overly ripe or underly ripe produce. Otherwise, you're not getting the bulk of those nutrients there. So we start with that, and then as a chef, as a cook, that's definitely a big focus. And also, the care with which the food was grown translates into the plate one way or another. That's very true. So there's some advantages to the higher end proteins and whatnot. And then we work with the athlete to figure out what their macronutrient needs are. Macronutrients are proteins, carbohydrates, fats, and that translates to calories. And so I typically work with registered dietitians who do the intake, the conversations and the intake interviews. And then they are the ones who help me with that portion, figuring out what their macronutrients are. And then they give me, okay, this is the total daily caloric macronutrient needs. And then we break it down into main meals and then snacks. And so from there, it's very easy to have the profile of a person and understand, okay, this person needs 28 grams of protein, 30 grams of carbs, and 5 grams of fat, just for easy numbers there, per meal. And so go ahead and do your magic and play it that way. I follow the exchange system. Have you ever heard of the exchange system by chance?
I don't think I'm familiar with that one.
Okay, so the exchange system was originally created by dietitians to help diabetic people learn how to use a weight scale, measuring spoons, and measuring cups, and serve their food in a very consistent basis. So essentially, a serving size is equivalent to a certain amount of grams of a micronutrient. So for example, a third cup of rice is equivalent to 15 grams of carbohydrates. And so there's the fat, the carb, the protein, and this system is very easy to understand. Don't want to give you guys too much information all at once, but I've become very good at understanding that system and have used that system to essentially divide the grams needed per meal into a serving size. And so, for example, in this example that we were just talking about, 30 grams of carbohydrates would be equivalent to 2/3 cups of rice. 5 grams of fat would be equivalent to 1 tablespoon of a fat-based sauce, or a quarter of an avocado. And you can mix and match with the servings. That's where the creativity on my part begins to grow, and I can just mix and match based on the serving sizes of the exchange system.
Yeah, I want to sit on that. You typically draw on food databases. One of the things we talk about is the more you weigh, especially when you normalize it to like grams, the more you can recognize, like in a restaurant, okay, that's 100, 20 grams of whatever. What you're telling me is you essentially have memorized kind of a library of what standard foods and their portions versus the grams. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Yeah. So first I'll give you a quick example. For sweet potatoes, it's for potatoes and sweet potatoes is half a cup. For quinoa, it's a quarter cup. For rice and most of starches and grains and legumes is a third cup. And that serving is equivalent to 15 grams of carbohydrates. For fat, one exchange is 5 grams. So a tablespoon of oil would be 5 grams of fat. But you can interchange and use that serving of fat to make sauces, and we'll get into that in a little bit, and then serve very easily. Just grab, a chimichurri sauce and serve 1 tablespoon, and you know that you're giving them 5 grams. Of course, I've done a lot of work on this, and in order to prep for cooking for these athletes, I've analyzed a lot of recipes, and I've made sure that the recipe that I'm following is yielding the exact nutrition that I need in order to follow this exchange system. So that's pretty much the system that I follow. And then as far as protein, 1 exchange of protein is equivalent to 3 ounces or 21 grams of protein. The original system calls for 1 ounce or 7 grams of protein being one exchange of protein. But the performance industry has evolved and used that and made 21 grams the one exchange. That way we can give people the basic needs of a high protein meal by just using the 1 equals 21 instead of 1 equals 7. So it's 3 times that original serving size.
I got it. So then you can have a couple exchanges per meal or whatever to hit that 40 grams. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Fascinating stuff, man. So what I like is the level of precision. It also hits on the fact that it isn't just about what matters, obviously, for quality and, like you said, sourcing and all of that. But if you're going to meet some goal, for energy intake and also for macros, and it sounds like even from a health perspective, if you're diabetic and whatever, that you need to be precise in some way, right? And I think the average person listening kind of generally understands that in terms of tracking calories and macros, but you kind of take it to another level, right? Like with the RD involved and you involved. So let's segue that into the idea of everyone out there who doesn't want to track or isn't tracking or thinks it's obsessive or whatever, but they have a goal and they think they could just eat certain foods. And that might come in the form of a named diet in a book, like we all know them, keto and carnivore and all the others. Or it might come in the thought of like, there's good and bad foods, or there's clean and not clean foods. And by the way, we take a very agnostic approach here of most foods are perfectly fine as long as they meet your other needs, your nutrient,
100%.
your calorie, and your macro needs. So like, what are your thoughts on that whole space?
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I'm very much of that same philosophy. there's no moral weight to food. It's not good or bad. You can have a fried chicken sandwich. I love fried chicken sandwiches, and I have them once or twice a month, and I'm still very healthy because I'm keeping track of my diet 80% of the time, right? So that allows me for that 20% to be a human being and enjoy the sensual experience of having a food that I really like. I also deeply believe that food has a spiritual connection in many ways. It's like when you eat a good meal, you're just like so joyful, and it just changed. There's some energy there that really heightens the experience of just living, So, and then going back to your original question, yeah, I mean, eating clean, clean for the lack of a better term, I do not like that word, but eating healthy and eating, high quality food and healthy meals with vegetables and whole grains and high quality protein, that's part of the equation. But if your body is not getting consistent energy day in and day out for a long period of time, then it doesn't know what to really do with the body composition. Because if you're thinking that you're giving enough protein to your body to sustain and then help you put on more muscle mass, you're thinking that, but you really don't know. If you think that you're giving your body enough energy through carbohydrates, but really you're over or underdoing it, then that has an effect. Same with fat. Fat has a direct effect to hormone levels and satiety for that matter. So if a person is looking to attain a very specific body composition goal, being very consistent with one's diet is an absolute must. And that comes with making sure that you're serving yourself the exact amount of food day in and day out. Our bodies reward us by being consistent and by getting the exact amount of energy that the body needs. Otherwise, it's gonna stall that progress that one is seeking. So it depends how bad you want it. If you want it really bad, then I say, track and measure and weigh your food, because it's that important.
Yeah, there's always effort involved. And I like that you said, look, you're either thinking or guessing, but you don't know, or it's pretty clear. And of course you can develop a skill or an intuition over time, doing it over and over and over again, just like you can kind of probably eyeball portions and know, but you're still knowing because you're measuring it in some way. I want to hit on that consistency factor because I've touched on it lightly over the years on this show when it comes to sleep, when it comes to calorie intake. And I've even seen with certain clients where, they try to do this like up and down, either with protein or calories, and average it out for the week. But because of the volatility, something's off, like their metabolism is a bit downregulated. And it's almost like the body's in a dieting state, even when it's not. What do you know about that, either the science or just from experience?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about my experience first. I have a culinary nutrition degree. I've been in this industry for the last 16 years. I'm about to be 34 years old, and just now have I finally figured out what my body wants. Like it's, even the experts have an issue applying the knowledge into one's experience. So, and lo and behold, and I hate to admit this, it was consistency. It was actually weighing or measuring a cup of rice and 6 ounces of chicken and a cup and a half of vegetables and adding whatever sauce I wanted, that led me to have the best composition of my life to date. I'm the strongest. It looked great. So I'm very proud of that. But what I wasn't doing was being consistent with my measuring, even though I knew I had to be, right? And I wasn't week in and week out. I was being very healthy, then going out and not being too healthy, and then so on and so forth. And that I spun my wheels for years and years and years. Nutrition doesn't have to be hard. It's, I think, made hard by the amount of over information and disinformation that we have in social media nowadays. But consistency and being very thoughtful and knowing your numbers and what your body needs week in and week out for 3, 6, 9 months will get those results.
Hey, it's Philip, and if you ever wanted a version of what I talk about on the show that's available to you 24/7, that's exactly why I built the Fitness Lab app. It's an all-in-one AI-based app for training, nutrition, biofeedback, habits, a coach chat that's trained on my frameworks, and the latest science. Plus, real-time feedback on the stuff you're actually trying to work on as you improve your body composition. Right now, it is 20% off all plans, but only through Friday, May 8th. Go to witsandweights.com/app. That's witsandweights.com/app. The link is also in the show notes. That's witsandweights.com/app. Now, back to the episode. How does that reconcile with nonlinear approaches like carb and calorie cycling and also weekend refeeds? Because there's some research supporting, for example, a weekend refeed during a fat loss phase or in a calorie deficit could actually have a slight advantage for lean mass retention versus not. I'm curious about your thoughts.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, no, that's the science is very sound there. I wouldn't say, go cold turkey and just be on a calorie deficit for 52 weeks because that's not healthy. I go through refeeding phases. I go through being very strict with my diet, and then 1-2 weeks I travel and I don't even think about measuring my food. I'm just enjoying food, and then I come back. I read somewhere, I forget the name of the paper, but our bodies don't lose muscle mass or gain fat mass as quickly as we think they do. So 2 weeks is not going to blunt your 5-year consistency, So yeah. Going through those motions is also being a human. And again, I mentioned the 80-20 rule. If you control 80% of your input, of your intake of food and your diet, your sleep, your stress levels, alcohol intake, you can allow yourself to have those drinks, those cheat meals, those, days where you're off and you just want to eat something. It's fine. We're all human. We don't have to be perfect.
Yeah, and that's very consistent with like the brain research on how the brain gets used to certain patterns and find safety in them. And then, like you said, if you're doing something 80% of the time, the other 20%, your brain sees it as an anomaly as opposed to something to react to. So that's kind of cool. You mentioned the spiritual connection of food, and that's another topic that's fun to get into, whether it's spiritual or enjoyment of food. I mean, I've had commenters on YouTube be like, food's not for enjoyment. It's just, for nutrition, or food's not, right? And you get these weird conflating it with, right, because it conflates it with like, well, if you enjoy food, that's the problem with, obesity and Western diet, blah, 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 blah. So tell us more about the value of just that part of food, like having nothing to do with performance or macros or calories.
Yeah, I mean, humans are social, right? We're social beings. I think we all can agree that COVID hit everyone super hard because we weren't socializing with people. We're all just alone in our homes, maybe with somebody, maybe not. But I always think about that time because the enjoyment of going out, having beers with the boys, having drinks with the girls, or just going out with the group and enjoying breaking bread is a historically everlasting. You see in every part of history of humanity. It's just part of who we are. And so to me, I mean, to hear somebody say that they don't enjoy food and it's just for nutrition, and I mean, you're missing a big part of enjoying being in this earth. There's like Middle Eastern food that's delicious, Asian food that's delicious. Like, we are such a rich, I think, race. Earth is such a rich race, and we have so much to explore and so many flavor profiles to see. It's a little overwhelming when I think about it from the culinary perspective, but also I think it's so beautiful because it's, again, such a social thing to do. And my experience with traveling and going to other countries and eating their cuisine and being part of their culture has been very eye-opening in the sense that, we're really a speck of dust, and it makes me feel more connected with each other, with every other person in the world. So there's that social aspect, but I also feel like the spiritual side is, I don't know, when I eat something, I get this FVF factor. I won't cuss on this podcast, but the FVF factor, that's what I call it. There's this inner sense of like, damn, this is so, like, how is this so good? How can and it's just maybe it's the chef in me, but it's just such a joyful,
you're not the only one,
thing that just comes out here, and so I think it's just such an important part of being a human.
You made me think of so many memories as you talked about traveling the world. Like the first time I had really good gnocchi, I think is how it's pronounced, right? Mm-hmm. In Italy, right? On my honeymoon. Or when I went to Japan years ago, and I was very picky back then. I didn't eat vegetables or anything. And the guy I was with, like, got me to try everything, octopus and like vegetables of all kinds and tempura. And it was just, I love food. Montreal, I was so surprised. Montreal is only 5 hours from here. Like the quality of the food there, breakfast, lunch, dinner, you eat a lot of calories because it's just so good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we need to lean into that and not like judge ourselves for that as conflated with, the challenges people face with emotional eating and all that other stuff. Let me ask you this. So, just full disclosure, right? You work for Trifecta. We're an affiliate of Trifecta. If you keep listening to the show later on, we're going to drop a secret word that if you go to witsandweights.com/question and give me that word, you're entered for a giveaway for a full week of free meals from Trifecta. But the reason I bring it up is because I know through Trifecta, there's different ways to filter on food. And one of those is types of diets like keto. And I remember when we were setting up our partnership, I said, I don't really want to showcase it that way for me. I want to showcase more about the macros and the foods that are in there and stuff. So is there value, or what is the value in these named diets? Like, what are your thoughts on marketing them specifically? Because people want them, I'm sure, versus the value in them.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll start by saying that we have moved away from being a diet specific company and having diet plan or meal plans around a diet like paleo and keto and Mediterranean, so on and so forth. And now we've moved into what I think is a modernization of the meal delivery industry, a goal outcome meal plan. So now we have the performance plan or the I forget the names of it. We just changed them, so apologies on that. But essentially, it's a higher calorie meal plan for people looking to put on weight. The Flex Choice program, which is for people looking just to eat healthy and maintain their weight. And then we have a low calorie one, which is for people looking to lose weight. We also continue to keep keto as part of the rotation and the plant-based since they're so popular, and we just have a lot of business around this. So it doesn't make sense for us to let go of them. And it seems like people have found success within that. The keto diet is very good for specific chronic diseases and illnesses. So we continue to support that diet for that reason. And plant-based, it's here to stay. So we support people who are vegan and choose that lifestyle as well. But I'm happy to say that this move was something that I pushed, that we really needed to move away from diet specific to goal specific, because it encompasses more people and it helps more people really more clearly understand what we're offering for them. And within that is, of course, every single meal is macro balance, which is the essence of Trifecta.
Love it, man. Yeah, no, I'm glad you made that move, and I didn't know that. It wasn't a setup, just so the listener knows it wasn't a setup. I'm looking at it right now, and I see what you're talking about, right? The protein build meal, get lean, flex choice. Goal-based is really the way to do it, right? Because that's right to left. Like, here's my goal. Now let me back up into all the variables for my food, my training, my everything else.
Yep.
All right, cool. So actually, one thing came to mind when we were talking keto was you mentioned earlier about satiety and the fat exchange and all that. I think protein technically has the highest satiety, and yet we hear a lot about fat having high satiety and why it's important for that reason. What are your thoughts on the satiety aspect of those two macros?
Oh yeah, great question. Well, yeah, protein 100% satiety. I mean, I just had a lunch with 6 ounces of chicken and I feel phenomenal right now, and I'm in a calorie deficit. So that's been a huge part of having that satiety. Also combining it with high volume foods like leafy greens and a lot of vegetables, a lot of like high fiber foods. That helps with blunting the hunger cues while one is in a calorie deficit. Now, to answer your question, fat is very calorically dense. So we talk about high volume foods, meaning that they occupy a lot of space in your stomach, but don't have a lot of calories. They have a lot of nutrients, but not a lot of calories. But fat is very calorically dense. And per gram of fat, you get 9 calories. Per gram of protein and carbs, you get 4. So you're almost getting 2.2, 2.1 times the amount of calories per gram, which means that a very small amount of fat will get you a lot of calories. And it's very easy to overeat if you're not really measuring those correctly, or if you don't know that you're eating fat. That's why the fried foods tend to be so unhealthy, right? They're delicious, but it's because they just have so much fat in them. They've been cooked in a fat medium that you're not only eating the carbohydrate that was just fried, you're eating copious amounts of fat as well.
Yeah, fat is a classic addition to those who are low calorie, right? To get those calories up, especially when we're bulking. But for that same reason, you've got to watch out. This goes back to the clean or healthy discussion, the fact that, nuts and avocado and salmon are all delicious sources of fat, and they're a little more nutrient dense than some alternatives. So it depends on your calorie needs. Let's get into cooking a little bit here. And for those at home, because again, that's your expertise, who are not the greatest cooks on their own, right? Like I think the majority of people, I'm going to just put it that way and generalize, the majority of people kind of half-ass their cooking, or like, they'll look up recipes online, they'll follow them. And maybe over time with lots of cooking, you get better and better at it, right? Do you have like some top tips? Like, let's say your top 3 tips for people who just want to cook better food at home that they look forward to. They like to prep. They want it to taste good, but it's not complicated.
Yeah. I mean, my mother, bless her heart, the smartest woman I know, and she just cannot cook a meal for her to save her life. So this is very dear and close to my heart. And unshameful plug in here, I teach this online in my own social media. I teach people how to cook, and this is one of the biggest questions that come to me. Like, what do I do? I hate cooking, or I don't know how to cook. So, few tips. Number 1, focus on the basics and on what you like. You don't need to be a Michelin star chef. Like, there's no need for that. Your cuts don't need to be perfect. If you're just starting, focus on learning a few basics and mastering those. And those basics need to be things that you like to eat. If you are somebody who likes broccoli, rice, and chicken, no shame. Double down on that. Learn how to cook your chicken well, how to season it well. Learn how to use stocks in order to add flavor to your rice, and a couple of a couple of chopped onions in there, saute it, mix it in there. You have a delicious rice that doesn't have a lot of calories added to it, or minimal calories added to it. And then your broccoli, learn how to blanch it, learn how to roast it, learn how to saute it, and experiment with whatever it is that you can stick for a long period of time without getting bored. At the point where you get bored, then you learn something new. But by focusing on the basics of cooking very simple things that you can stick with, that you like, that you enjoy eating, that becomes very simple. Number 2, if you don't like cooking vegetables, go to Costco, go to Sam's Club, go to your local supermarket and buy frozen vegetables. I'm a chef, and I'm not ashamed to say that I live off of those frozen vegetables. I'm visiting my mom right now in South Florida, and we went to Costco and I bought a whole bag of those vegetables. Being here can get really hectic, and I don't have a lot of time to cook. So that has been a great addition. They have roasted vegetables that have a lot of flavor. They're organic as well, so there's that added unique selling proposition to them, and that saves a lot of time because you can just cook potatoes, rice, quinoa, orzo, whatever your preferred starch is, and then grab a protein and then drop it in there. Third, I would say proteins is what takes the longest time to learn how to cook well. If you're somebody who doesn't have the means or just don't want to cook proteins, there's a lot of really good companies out there that are selling ready-to-eat proteins that are sous vide and come sauced. Trifecta, we sell proteins a la carte, so you can buy a pound of proteins from chicken to bison to beef to salmon, and you can just have that and plate it on your own. So we live in a time period where food science is very advanced. We are essentially the result of the frozen meal movement that started in the 1960s. We are the evolution of that, but we've taken a massive step in making sure that the food that we're providing is not high in sodium, it doesn't have any sort of additive or preservative, MSG, anything of that sort. We are a very clean, healthy meal delivery. So there's always those options. So yeah, those are the 3 things that I would advise.
Those are great. And those first 2, especially the making slight additions to what you like to eat. I was thinking of a dinner my wife just made this week, and she's come a long way. Again, she'll admit that she was not a great cook when she started, but she took pork tenderloin, she put some teriyaki soy sauce type sauce she made from scratch. Delicious. She took rice, added coconut milk, and then she took broccoli and she always roasted in a pan with a little oil and salt. And that's really all you need. Broccoli's so good,
Sounds delicious. Yeah.
And there you go. Right. Like it doesn't have to be complicated.
Exactly.
And I always tell people when they're meal prepping, like go big, like just put huge quantities of stuff. Like if you had to prep a protein, what would be your favorite protein or 2 to prep in bulk?
I buy the chicken from Costco in bulk.
Like chicken breast or
Chicken
thighs? Or
breast. Yep, chicken breast. Chicken thighs, you can't go. That's actually, I'm glad you bring that up. If you're
I love
somebody
thighs.
just starting to cook, yeah, I mean, chicken thighs is very easy to dry out. So if you want to eat chicken and you want to eat something that's good all the time, chicken thighs is the way to go. I like to change every 2 weeks and either buy a salmon and just cook the salmon ahead of time, or I buy the steak from Costco and then I just eat steak, and that's like my treat to myself. So I also do turkey. So I like to, again, it's the variety that I try to bring to my life. You know, I already know how to cook all these things, so I just experiment from week to week.
it's funny with turkey, right? Because at Thanksgiving they're so inexpensive that I always think, why don't families just buy like 10 turkeys? You know, that'll last. But of course, you'll get bored of turkey.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
and need a space for it. Steak. Oh, I want to ask you about steak because I've had a lot of conversations with people about that. It's a lot of confusion over the cuts of steak, the marbling, the tenderness, how to prepare it. You know, people want to get more protein too and don't want it to be too fatty of a cut like ribeye, which I love ribeye, but you know, much higher fat content. So what would be the most, I guess, good balance of economics and leanness that's easy to prepare? Because I know some steaks like are super cheap, but then they're really tough and you need to marinate or slow cook or something like that. Like, what are your thoughts on steak?
Yeah, I personally buy skirt steak, and that is the in between your tenderloin and your short rib. You know, one is super tough, one is very expensive. The skirt steak tends to be the middle of the ground. If you can find Teres Major, which you don't really see that cut too often in supermarkets. It's mainly used in commercial food manufacturing, and that's what we use at Trifecta for keto meals in our a la carte. It's very tender, surprisingly tender, and it's a very economic piece of meat. Also very lean. So those two are my go-tos.
Man, skirt steak with chimichurri, I'm thinking, or what's the like churrasco, or what am I trying to think of? You said you're in South Florida. I grew up in Miami. I grew up in
Oh, hi.
Hialeah.
I'm in Miami.
So a lot of okay.
That's crazy.
Exactly. Go to Miami. Cuban food, Argentinian food,
Yeah.
every Caribbean. Yeah, so good. Okay. So speaking of sauces, I know you mentioned sauces once or twice,
Mhm.
and that is another tricky area for folks because they can easily add a lot of flavor and even nutrition in some cases, but also a lot of calories. So best maybe the top few sauces people should always like be making for their food, or like really easy ones. Like, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah. Let me start by saying this. So when I think of sauces, I classify them in three categories: calorie neutral, carb forward, and fat forward, or fat based. Calorie neutral can be anything like a salsa or a hot sauce. There's sauces that come from peppers and vinegar and tomatoes that don't add a lot of calories. You know, the serving size is 10 calories per serving in the nutrition label, but it adds a lot of flavor. So if you're looking for a way to, if you're in a cut, or if you want to maintain your weight and make sure you're not adding enough a bunch of calories, then calorie neutral sauce will be it. Now, if you're on the opposite and you're trying to gain muscle weight, the last thing, to gain muscle, the energy intake needs to be really high, right? About 500 calories above your maintenance, give or take. And so sometimes that can be a lot of food for certain people. If we're talking about linebackers that play in the NFL, like these boys eat a lot. So how do you give them enough calories so that they can actually meet their caloric needs, but not be overly full and be sluggish in the field? You double down on, I think we kind of touched on this earlier, on liquid calories, but also on carb forward sauces. So your teriyakis, your barbecues, your sweet and sours, those are very carb heavy, sugar heavy for the sake of this argument or of this conversation. That with 1 tablespoon you're adding 15 carbohydrates, 15 grams of carbohydrates, or with 1 cup you're adding, a bunch of them.
Right. That's 60 calories. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then with fat based, it's a great way. Fat based sauces is a great way to add a lot of flavor, but add a lot of richness to your meal. And when you talk about fat based sauces, think about vinaigrettes, think about aiolis or mayo, think about any sort of variation from that. For example, if you do chimichurri, like we were just talking, that's really a vinaigrette. It's got a 3-to-1 ratio of oil to vinegar, maybe a 4-to-1 ratio, and that provides a lot of flavor in itself with a lot of nutrients from the herbs and the peppers that you add to it. But it's also adding a lot of calories from fat, right? So fat is good because it adds richness. So with those three categories in mind, the most popular, I have a list. I wish I was at home, but I have a list in my wall of the most popular because I'm going to be making videos about these. But anything that is fat-based that can be an oil, like olive oil and vinegar, like a zoo sauce, which is essentially just a chimichurri, but Asian style. It has jalapenos, it has cilantro, it has a little bit of oregano and coriander. Whereas chimichurri, it has cilantro, it has parsley, it has a red pepper, oil, and vinegar. Romesco sauce is another delicious sauce that you can do that's fat-based. Instead of making it with bread, you can make it with nuts, with almonds, toasted almonds, and olive oil, and you have something delicious. Then having your barbecues and your teriyakis, like I mentioned, is something that most households in the United States have. Fat-based, you can also have your ranch in the United States is super popular. And then your sauces, again, we're going to go back to that. I personally add a lot of hot sauce to my food. I'm Hispanic, so I love heat. So that tends to be my seasoning when I'm in a rush. So having a variety of those, and it doesn't need to be, you don't need to make these at home. You can, if you want to control the health and the caloric and added sugar portion of it, but you can buy them in the supermarket. You don't have to be a Michelin star chef.
So we've made the rounds through a lot of the aspects of cooking, of food, of what's in your food, of why we do it, right, to hit our goals. So, food quality matters, like social connection matters, macros matter, taste matters. You bring all these things together for a typical week. My audience, I will say, is like an average person who has a very busy job, very stressed. Maybe they have a family and they're trying to make it all work for the week. Is there kind of not a template or meal plan, but a structure that's time efficient to kind of think of your whole week and putting it together?
Yeah. I'll give you what I do as someone who also lives a very occupied life with a tight schedule. I like to understand what I'm craving for a week. If it's potatoes, I roast a bunch of potatoes, cut them, roast them. I have my vegetables that are bought from Costco, frozen vegetables, and then I look at the protein, and I typically cook either 5 to 7 days worth of that protein, and within 2 hours, I can have all my food portioned in my containers, ready to cool down. So I just put it in the fridge, cool it down completely, and then cover it. And that's my way of making sure that I have consistency throughout the week. If you want to add a little more variety on a meal, your sauces are going to be the differentiating factor because the sauce is the essence of a dish, right? The sauce is what makes the dish a cuisine. So I tend to have a couple of different sauces in my fridge, and I add barbecue to one, I add chimichurri to another one, I add tabbouleh to another one, and then I just interchange with those three throughout the week until I run out of the sauces. And that's that. So it doesn't need to be complicated, and it doesn't need to be fancy. It just needs to work for what you like. And that's essentially what I like.
That's pretty straightforward. And then for vegetables, it sounds like the frozen veggies are an option. Or do you bulk prep starches or vegetables as well, or do you do those more as you go?
Yeah, no, I tend to bulk prep starches as well, with rice and potatoes being the number one that I consume. So
you mentioned potatoes, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I tend to do five days at a time because I don't want the food to go bad. And of course, you can adjust this based on what your food beliefs are. If you don't like to have something in the fridge for more than 2 days, and just prep the food for 2 days. If you're okay with 5 days, and prep it for 5 days. Adjust as needed. It's just a guideline. It's a blueprint. It's not a law.
Yeah. And there's always the freezer. And also some of us have cold spots in our fridge. Like I have a very cold spot in the back top. So like things will last a little longer.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
So interesting. 2 different people asked a similar question recently about resistant starch. So we know resistant starch is naturally in some things like white potatoes, which is considered the top satiety food as far as I understand. But then also when you cook rice and then cool it, it converts some of the starch to resistant starch. And there's this theory that some people respond really well to an increase in resistant starch for a variety of factors. Is this something you're aware of that you think about or not?
I don't have enough knowledge on that, so I can't really speak to it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Look into it because there's a few people I know with certain conditions that have responded well to it nutritionally.
Interesting.
I'm like, and so there's this whole hot carb versus cold carb thing out there I thought it was hogwash initially, and I saw some legitimacy behind it. So
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I can't say I've experienced anything with my body, but yeah, I'll definitely.
All right. So as far as like the skill of cooking, then what skill or habit, like from your experience, makes a big difference to learn, whether it's knife skills or using certain equipment or the stove, oven, etc.?
Yeah, definitely. I'll start with two. First, always make sure that your cutting board is large enough and that it's secured with a damp paper cloth underneath. Always. Please start with that. That should be your baseline safety. You don't want a moving cutting board while you're cutting something because you can chop off your fingers very easily. And if you haven't done so and you haven't been securing your cutting board up to today, then you're lucky. And then number two, organizing your cooking station by having a bowl where your waste goes, and then having a bowl or a container where your finished product goes, or having the tray where you're going to be cooking your food in. Always helps with the flow of your cooking to be better. That way you're not jumping from one place to another. You're not going to the trash. You're not, those micro side steps actually take a lot of time in the grand scheme of things in cooking. And I'll add a third one, keeping your knife sharp. Like, I cannot stress how important this is. Buying a sharpener, either a whetstone or one of those automatic sharpening tools, or taking your knives to be sharpened at your local knife company is something that I cannot stress enough how important it is. A dull knife is 10 times more dangerous than a sharp knife, because the sharp knife just goes through the vegetable. A dull knife can actually not go through the vegetable, make you stab yourself, and make you, cut yourself at the same time. So I would say make those three things part of your cooking ritual, and you'll become a much better cook immediately.
Those are good tips. The cutting board, I hadn't heard that, so thank you. And then my dad was a butcher, so I've heard about knives. What do you think of the knife blocks that have built-in sharpeners?
Yeah, those are great. Yeah, if you can store them, at home and you have a place, yeah, absolutely. I have the whetstones, of course, as a professional cook, but at the same time, I also have a Cuisinart, the 1-2, sort of like pass the blade from, there's these little brown stones, and they just sharpens the blade, so you can get it very affordably in Amazon, I think for less than $30.
Cool, man. Yeah. So we've covered a lot today about cooking and food and everything else. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all trying to fuel ourselves with our food, and that is the secret word, guys. It's fuel. Okay. But I do want to kind of segue into what you do and the company you represent in the form of a question first, and then we can tell people where to find you. But when does meal delivery make sense? Because for years I've had a small section of clients who they're just so busy and so stressed. Money isn't as much of an issue for them as, say, time and convenience and stuff. So there's definitely a place for it. What are your thoughts on like the ideal situation where people would consider it?
Yeah, 100%. Exactly what you just said. It's a tool that we now have, and we should be. I think it's very exciting to have, and to be in the United States and have it as an option, to have a service deliver the food that you want to eat every week to your door. And so if life gets busy, if something is going on where you can't actually cook, then having this meal delivery sent to you ensures that you're staying consistent. And it's not something that you need to stay on forever, because meal boredom happens, and we see that in our business. You can turn it on and off as you see fit. But for myself, I've been with Trifecta for the last almost 8 years, and I've eaten Trifecta for the great majority of those 8 years. I get 7 meals a week, aside from making sure that our kitchens are producing our food well. They're following the recipe well. I also eat it for my own health and consistency purposes. I have 7 meals that I cook at home, but I have 7 meals where if one day, for whatever reason, I woke up late, I'm sick or whatever, and I have no desire to be in the kitchen, I just reheat this meal and I'm ready to go. So it's a beautiful tool to have that helps with convenience, helps bridge the gaps in time. and allows you to be consistent over a long period of time.
Yeah. And I'll say you could be intentional and plan ahead too without all the time of planning. In other words, you're not going to DoorDash in the last minute, getting some local fast food or pizza. You're thinking about it, and then you guys have the macro balanced meals that people can then log and track and everything. So that's awesome. All right. So everybody listening, if you go to witsandweights.com/question, you can submit a question for the show or for Mario. And you could also drop the word fuel and say, hey, this is the secret word, and enter me in the giveaway for a week.
Not so secret anymore.
Yeah. It's secret if you listen to the show, and it's not secret if you listen to it. So anyway, we want to send folks your way as well. I know you have some content online you just mentioned about cooking. Where can people find you? Where do we want to send folks after they listen to this?
Yeah. Thank you for that. I am very present on Instagram at Chef Mario is my page. I teach the basics of cooking. So if you want to improve your cooking and you want to listen to more hacks of this sort, I post weekly. I'm starting a YouTube channel, Mario Limaduran, my name, and then I'm also on Facebook posting the same reels as Mario Limaduran.
All right, awesome. We're going to throw all that in the show notes. You guys go check out Mario, Chef Mario, follow him, look at his stuff. I mean, he has the kind of content that's not your like typical, influencer stuff. It's like super helpful. And if you're looking to cook better and you just want to look at good food too, check him out. So thank you again, Mario, for coming on Wits and Weights. It's been a pleasure, man.
Thanks, Philip. Appreciate the time. Enjoy the conversation, and hopefully your audience also enjoyed it. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, man. This podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Please consult your healthcare provider before making any health changes. Some links mentioned may be affiliate links, which means I may earn a commission at no extra cost to you if you choose to purchase.